Happy Friday, hockey fans, and welcome into a new edition of Daily Faceoff Live, streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, and as always, brought to you by Fountain Tire. They treat your vehicle like it's their vehicle, and you got a chance to save some money. Right now, you can save up to $225 on a set of 4 select tires, including Goodyear, up until December 14th, plus an extra $50 on any service of $150 or more. Some restrictions apply. Stop in a Fountain Tire, make an appointment, or check out fountaintire.com. I am Tyler Remchek. He is Frank Saravalli, rocking his Friday green, looking all fresh.
Shout out to the Vermont Catamounts and our former graphics producer, Brendan Bradley, and assistant coach at Vermont. They swept, and I promised I would wear some green today. Last week, they swept 17th ranked UMass, both games of the weekend. Tonight and this weekend, they've got 15th ranked UMass Lowell. So good hockey at the gut. And hey, let's go. Let's go Cats.
Love it. Shout out to Brendan, and shout out to a little college hockey action coming up this weekend. Tremendous sports weekend on tap. Great NFL schedule, great NHL schedule. Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, Frank, who you got?
I think I might be riding with Dave Portnoy on this one.
I think I might be too. Anyways, it's going to be a good weekend of sports. Before we look ahead a little bit, we're also going to be joined by Arpon Basu from The Athletic coming up in our big segment. We're going to talk a little bit about the Montreal Canadiens, but the story that dominated yesterday in the NHL, Frank, Connor McDavid hitting career point 1,000. He is the 4th fastest player to accomplish the feat in NHL history, just about beating Mike Bossy. He finished a few games back of him and coming up just a little bit quicker than Peter Stastny. And of course, Connor McDavid does it in, I think, pretty nice fashion, with his running mate Leon Draisaitl being the one that set him up. And being in the building last night, every time McDavid was touching the puck in the offensive zone, there was a buzz in the crowd, and the crowd was absolutely humming when they saw this 2-on-1 develop. Everyone knew what Leon Draisaitl wanted to do with that puck. McDavid finishes it off on the 2-on-1. His dad, Brian, nice and excited in the crowd. The team comes off the bench. All in all, a great moment for number 97.
It's unbelievable what he's accomplished. And I know everyone kind of just, because of the routine greatness that we see, everyone kind of shrugs. They're like, yeah, of course he got there. But to think about it from this perspective, 1,000 points in 98 fewer games than Sidney Crosby, who I think is an NHL Mount Rushmore player, 189 fewer games than Evgeny Malkin, and 211 games fewer than Alex Ovechkin. Yeah, we can talk about era adjusted, and that's certainly important. But what McDavid is doing, I believe he's the second best player in NHL history, only to Wayne Gretzky. And that's, he's very likely, if he remains healthy, to be just the second player to get to 2,000 points. That's the next sort of thing in his scope. And look, the team accomplishments, everything else that still needs to happen to be able to sort of put him in that conversation and pedigree and category as some of the other names that we just talked about. There's still a long way to go from that perspective, but maybe that's kind of what's so annoying about the discourse on social media. Like, it can't just be a great night for McDavid and his family. Instead, it needs to be, well, where are his cups? Where are this? Where's that? And, they want to talk about Sid or talk about whoever. That's not what this is about. This is about Connor McDavid getting to 1,000 points in pretty unbelievable fashion.
Yeah. Again, I say it all the time on the Oilers shows that I host, but appreciate this, because this is a once in a generation, borderline once in a lifetime kind of player that we're getting to watch here in Connor McDavid, and the numbers back it up. The run he's on right now to get to 1,000 points when he did 9 points in his last 3 games. It really is something special to see the way he can take over games. Like last night again, Frank, he was everywhere early in that game trying to get that 1,000th point out of the way. And it was one of those nights where it almost feels like he can just create chances on command.
Well, he can. That's how good he is. And it is amazing. Jason Gregor pointed this out yesterday, but quite literally every round number that he's had a chance to get to, from 100, 200, 300, 400, all the way to 1,000, every single game, he's done it with a multi-point game. So he's always sort of not just hit that, but kind of gotten to the next step. So he has certainly a feel for the moment. He's been an incredibly, impactful clutch player in that perspective. And I think when you look at the way that his game continues to rise to the next level, the most highly evolved player of all time, this is just another feather in his cap. And I think maybe the most impressive part about what we've seen from McDavid is that it still kind of really feels like he's just getting started.
I know it is weird when you kind of go look at his career page at NHL.com and it's like, whoa, we're halfway through this thing potentially. Like it is wild. I mean, he's in year 9, he's right there.
Yeah, but even then, it still feels like hasn't even quite reached the peak of his powers yet, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, which makes it interesting to think how quickly could he potentially get to 2,000 points. 23 individual shot attempts for McDavid over the last 2 games, which is a pretty wild number. And he sends the Rogers Place crowd home happy yesterday, setting up Darnell Nurse for the overtime winner. And as we wrap it up, the shirts are always a funny thing. You usually see them for guys' 1,000th games. I like this one, McDavid with the little rose-colored sunglasses. It was apparently Leon Draisaitl who dug up the picture and got the Oilers training staff to put it together. You can't really see the bottom, but the top, it goes, this guy's got 1,000 NHL points, and then there's a question mark at the end of it. So I like the Oilers throwing a little jab at McDavid with the old photo there as well. So it was a good night in Edmonton as Connor McDavid joins the 1,000 point club. And now let's talk about who could potentially be next, Frank, because there are a few players who are right there. Nathan MacKinnon is the closest. You have Brad Marchand, who's just in the mix as well. And if Nikita Kucherov can find a way to put home 104 more points, then he's going to join, or he's going to be in the mix too. How many of those 3 do you think get it this year?
I think 2. Look, Marchand has really responded after a very quiet start to his season. But he needs 58 more points, if I'm not mistaken, to get there. And he's sort of been hovering in the 60+ point range per season. So I think he's probably going to be the one guy that falls short. McKinnon is a stone cold mortal lock, but I would suggest that even 104 points away, that is within sight of Nikita Kucherov this season. We've got approximately 80% of the season left for someone that's put up massive numbers, 103 now. Look, I think Kucherov gets there this year. What do you say?
I think he will too. And when you look at the fact that he would need to be under 2 points per game as sort of a pace, and he's produced at that kind of a pace. When you look at his numbers last year, I think he could do it. And I could also see him, similar to McDavid in the sense of, if he needs 10 points in his final 4 games this year, I could see Kucherov being the guy who's just like ding, 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 couple of 3-point games, and boom, he finds a way to get it in under the wire. So I think all 3 of them get it. You mentioned Brad Marchand is starting to pick up the production after, a bit of a slow start to the year. McKinnon is the lock out of the group if he can stay healthy this season. So I actually think we end up getting all 3. And then after that, the next player I think who's on the watch list is actually McDavid's running mate in Leon Draisaitl, who needs 128 more, as Brian points out in the YouTube chat. He's going to have to wait till next year, but he might be the only guy next year who gets there. So in this year and next, we probably welcome 4 more players to the 1,000 point club.
Yeah. And whenever you have a night like McDavid hitting 1,000, it's always a great time to look back on some unbelievable Wayne Gretzky stats. And I tweeted one that he's the fastest player, the fastest and second fastest player to get to 1,000 points, because he did his first 1,000 in 424 games, his second 1,000 in 433 games. And someone replied to my tweet, and this actually is even more mind-blowing than that. I'll read it for you quickly. It says, if you take away all the games where Gretzky had 1, 2, or 3 points, he still has over 1,000 points for his career, because he had 1,004 points in 217 games where he had 4 or more points. 217 games of 4 or more points. What? Are you kidding me? That's insane.
That is wild. Yeah. And we had someone else in the chat point out as we wrap this one out. It was Reaper said, on the bright side, Vasi getting known by the younger and newer fans. This guy's almost unknown with them. And yeah, when he's in that mix, I mean, did it a little bit quicker than McDavid did, but he's got some jaw dropping numbers too from when he was healthy early on in his career.
Yeah. And that wasn't the only milestone night. I mean, look at Andrei Vasilevskiy getting to 300 career wins. This stopped me stone cold in my tracks.
Yeah, Andrei Vasilevskiy, like you said, he joined the history books yesterday as well. 300th regular season win, and he shatters a 61-year-old record by Jacques Plante. This is from Jesse Granger, The Athletic, and he tweeted out, Plante was the fastest to 300, accomplishing it back in 1963 and doing it in his 528th game. Vasilevskiy does it in his 490th game. He beats the record handedly, Frank. And one, it speaks to the quality of goaltender here and also the quality of situation that he was in, getting to start his career basically as that Lightning dynasty got rolling.
Look, so much of goaltending, as we know, can be team dependent on what happens in front of you. But I think the larger question for me is, when it's all said and done, where will Vasilevskiy end up ranking among the all-time greats? And I don't necessarily just mean in terms of wins. I mean, if you start to put his overall career in perspective, still a long way from that being over. Are we going to be talking about him in the same category as Patrick Roy, Martin Brodeur, that same group? Is that the echelon that Andrei Vasilevskiy is rising to?
I think so. And just considering the fact that he should still have a decent amount of runway left here, Frank. He's already 39th in wins. And I don't think it's unreasonable to think, we're going to get 5 more seasons out of him, winning at least 30 games a season. Like 150 more wins puts him all the way up at 450. He's a top 10, top 7 goalie in terms of wins at that point. And I think the individual numbers will always be there. It is, again, it's a select group of guys who you can look at this point in their careers and go, stone cold first ballot Hall of Fame guy. And I'd be willing to go there for Vasilevskiy.
Yeah, well, I think that's a lock. Add in the Conn Smythe, the Stanley Cups. I mean, all that is unbelievable. 2 things I wanted to point out. One, a further appreciation for Marc-Andre Fleury, who you saw on that list of fastest to 300 wins. I think he was 4th or 5th. He's 2nd all time in wins. We'll never see another goalie get to 1,000 games. And as good as Vasilevskiy has been, you see how early you have to enter the league and how long you need to play for in order to get there. He's still 510 games away from 1,000. It's never going to happen. We may never see another 1,000-game goaltender ever again in the NHL. And when you look at, his overall play, the other thing is 917 career save percentage. Matt Larkin had a great piece today on Daily Faceoff about the death of the 900 goalie. Save percentages have dipped so much now in today's scoring climate that just getting to 900, where that used to be sort of like, I don't want to call it a Mendoza line, but it was like, if you're below 900, you ain't hacking it. Well, if you're at 900 now, that's like above league average right now.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to see how far that's fallen. And you're right, 900, 5 years ago was considered like the replacement level line amongst NHL goalies. That is not the case anymore. We're going to talk Montreal Canadiens in a couple of minutes. But before we do, Frank, wanted to zero in on another Canadian market for a second, because while it was all smiles in Edmonton and there was history in Tampa Bay, Rick Tocchet was spicy in Vancouver. Let's take a listen to how he started his post-game avail yesterday.
Don't ask me about individual players today, okay? No offense. I got to apologize to the fans. We're not playing good enough at home. It's on me. Guys played light tonight. I thought we were ready to go. We weren't. It's on me. I got to get this team to play harder in the first period. Spurts here and there, but not enough from a lot of guys. So got to go practice tomorrow and go right back to the drawing board. So that's really what it is. So don't ask me about individual players. I'm not going to answer that. You guys saw it, so thanks.
The start actually wasn't terrible. Jonathan Lekkerimäki gets his first career goal, but then it was 5 unanswered by the New York Islanders en route to a 5-2 victory. And it's been an interesting start to the year for the Canucks. I mean, they're above 500. Their record, when you just kind of glance at it, you go 8-4-3. That's solid, but still clearly some things Rick Tocchet is not happy about.
Yeah, he also flogged himself saying that he got out coached by Patrick Roy, which I thought was interesting. He said later in the press conference. Look, with all due respect to Rick Tocchet, I don't think that a lack of effort comes down to the coach on the bench. That's the guys who are actually wearing skates playing. And you're right. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. Think back to the start of this season. The Canucks blew 2 third-period leads in their first couple games, then went out east and looked pretty good. Had another road trip where they were excellent. And I really thought this team was turning the corner and figuring it out. And then they have a couple more stinkers. And I don't necessarily understand the lack of consistency. Yes, there's some new faces, but the inconsistency seems to ripple through a bunch of players who have been there for a while. So that part is certainly perplexing. And you look at, even just the last few games, it looked like someone like Elias Pettersson was kind of on the upward trajectory. Is he finding his game again? And I just can't find a rhyme or a reason as to why the Canucks have gone back and forth.
Yeah, and again, the struggles on home ice for a team who's traditionally been so good on home ice. They're 6-1 on the road, 2-3-3. So you can consider that and just straight up 2-6 straight up on home ice this year. It is certainly perplexing in Vancouver, but I also think, again, you've at least stashed away 8 wins. If this is going to be your struggle period and you found a way to go 8-4-3 in it, I actually think that sets up pretty well for if Rick Tocchet can get this team back onto the level that he wants them to in short order.
It also speaks to the standard and how high it is in Vancouver. I think that's a really healthy thing.
Yeah, 100%. Let's head out east, Frank, for today's big segment and get to today's edition of the All 32. It's a pleasure to welcome in Arpon Basu, senior columnist with The Athletic. He covers the Montreal Canadiens. And let's start with just sort of an overview of this first 5 weeks of the season, Arpon. It's not going great when you look at the standings. They're dead last in the Atlantic. But I want to know kind of, is there frustration from the fan base and I guess even the front office, or do they still kind of recognize where they are in the process here?
Yeah, I think there's a fair amount of frustration from the fan base. I mean, the problem is that, the Canadiens came out telling their fans that they expected a progression this season. Not that they were necessarily going to make the playoffs, but that they were going to move up the standings. This team is picked in the top 5 of the draft for 3 years in a row now. So it's really, that's their standard to not do that. And right now they're dead last in the NHL. So yeah, there's been frustration. And I think it's from the fan base, from the players, from management, from the coach. There's just overall frustration over the lack of a progression here. And the one thing that I find somewhat damning is, last season they didn't win a lot of games, but they were highly competitive towards the end of the year. Things like being relentless forechecking, making the neutral zone a difficult area of the ice to get through, making their blue line hard to cross with possession. Things that speak to a certain identity and a certain way of style of play have kind of gone by the wayside without any real turnover on the roster. So, when you come out and you set an expectation for your market, a market that's been pretty patient with this rebuild so far, but probably needed another year of patience, setting that expectation early on, I think, kind of triggered or at least cued the fans to expect something better than what they've seen. So yeah, I think it's fair to say there's been frustration all around, and the lack of progression, not only as a collective group of certain individual players, I think is the source of that.
So what do you believe is the right move from here? Because it would be easy for Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton to sit back and say, you know what, we're going to make a trade right now and we're going to bring in a temporary piece that can support this team better for the here and now, even though it's probably a temporary fix or stopgap. Does this team need that right now, or is the right play for the long haul to just put your head down and continue to grind?
Well, sure, the team needs it, but I don't think the organization from a strategic point of view should do that, and I don't think they will do that. I mean, it's really, to me, no matter what the Canadiens said going into the season, this is an information gathering season for Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes. They've gathered a bunch of players, young players, widely considered among the top prospect pools in the game right now. They got to know what they have in these guys. Like Kirby Dach's like an integral part of everything they're trying to do. He's playing on a wing right now because, he missed all of last season aside from 4 periods. They knew that it was going to take him some time to get up to speed, but now we're in mid-November. Thanksgiving's around the corner in the US, and that's obviously the benchmark for a lot of teams to know where they're at. And he's not at the level that they expect him to be or need him to be. There's a big hole at center if he doesn't work out as a center. And that's just an example of information gathering that's going on. So I think they're going to let them sink or swim, and they're going to identify the guys who are able to swim and identify the guys that sink, and that's going to inform a lot of their long-term decisions. But they're gathering some valuable information here, because I think part of the strategy behind setting at least somewhat elevated expectations was to see how some of these young guys were going to react to that environment, and they're finding that out right now. So I think there's value to this, but doesn't help an average fan watching this on a day-to-day basis to think in those long-term views. But I think management is not pleased, but they're being enlightened on some of their pieces right now, and they can help them identify the holes that they need to plug moving forward.
So as part of that information gathering, I know we're not quite a quarter of the way into the season yet. And if you were to look on paper, you'd see Nick Suzuki a point per game, or, Cole Caufield has been excellent with 12 goals. But when you look at the rest of the sort of, I want to call them more established pieces of this team, is it fair to say that the sort of veteran star players, if you want to call it that, I think that's it's not a properly placed term, but that group is the part that actually the Canadians have probably learned the most about, and probably not in a favorable way?
Maybe. Listen, I think that some of the positives, Brendan Gallagher's been very good this season. Josh Anderson in the new role has been good, even though the numbers don't reflect that. And there's a lot of pieces here that are not part of the long-term plan. Like Christian Dvorak's contract is expiring this year. Jake Evans' contract is expiring this year, although he's been excellent so far. David Savard's contract is expiring. Yoel Armia. So there's a lot of money coming off the books, and there's going to be a turnover here. The way I think the biggest issue for the Canadians is finding a way to bridge that turnover, basically to get to the stage where Juraj Slafkovsky is a fully established kind of star player. Ivan Demidov is a fully established star player. Michael Hage, who they also drafted in the first round last year. These guys are going to need some time. Their young defense is going to need some time. So they need to find a way to bridge that gap and get to a place where those are their key players. And so, some of the bad information they're collecting on some of their players right now is not the end of the world. If it were, Nick Suzuki, and frankly, despite the point totals, like Nick Suzuki is just coming out of a pretty bad stretch of hockey. Cole Caufield, despite the goal totals, is not playing quite as well as he did last season when he wasn't scoring at quite the same rate, but his game away from the puck is not, it's taken a tiny bit of a dip so far. So those aren't that alarming. To me, what's going to be the tricky part, and you see teams going through this, namely in that division, you look at Buffalo, you look at Detroit, you look at Ottawa, trying to transition out of the asset gathering phase into a winning phase it's filled with landmines, right? And there's no clear formula on how to do it. And the Canadians are going to need to figure that out, because, you could go the Detroit route where, they signed a bunch of free agents to kind of bridge that gap and have like a veteran presence on the team. Arguable if that was the way to go. It's not really producing the desired results right now. Ottawa has been kind of mired in this in-between phase for a while, seem to be coming out of it now, but it took an entire regime change to do it. And Buffalo, obviously, Buffalo is Buffalo, so like they're trying to get through it as best they can. But like you look at their organization, and a very enviable group of talent there. But how do you get to that next phase? There's no playbook for it. So I think the Canadians are trying to figure that out. And it's going to be fascinating to see how they approach this offseason, because I think there is going to be some desire to bring in some temporary help. It's just that the issue is that on free agency, not a lot of guys are signing 3-year deals in free agency. You get locked into term that you wind up regretting. So that's going to be the really tricky part. The one good thing they have going for them is they have a whack of draft picks in the upcoming draft. And I don't think, even though Ken Hughes says I'm not going to mortgage the future for a short-term fix, I think a lot of those draft picks are seen as currency to get them through this phase, as
They
opposed
couldn't
to
sign
drafting
them all if
players.
they wanted to.
No, exactly. And so, yeah, but those are the prospects. And then you look at the draft picks. I think the draft picks are trade currency more than anything else. Like you can have too many prospects, and the Canadians right now are kind of at their limit.
Yeah, that's something we've talked about a lot with a team like Utah as well. Like eventually you got to start moving on from them because you can't just have 50 guys sitting in your American League team.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your time, man. Thanks for doing this.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You can find him on Twitter or X at Arpon Basu. You can read his work at The Athletic. Frank, couple of things to get to here in the inbox question. Trev was in and says, what's your take on the Jamie Benn hit last night and the call afterwards? I believe we have the clip here as well if you want to fire it up. What'd you make of this?
So, look, I don't think anyone likes the end result. But I think what's so underappreciated about this hit, or maybe I should not underappreciated is not the right term. What's lost in it, I don't know, Pat, if you can go back to the beginning of the clip and freeze it, but this is Brandon Carlo trying to make a reverse hit on Jamie Benn. Brandon Carlo did this to himself. The fact that he ends up flying into the boards is a direct result of him trying to reverse hit Jamie Benn before this happens. I don't think enough people have picked up on that, and they want to crush Jamie Benn because I think you first look at it and you say, oh, man, it hit that far away from the board, sending a guy in flying doesn't look good, and it doesn't. But if you don't stop and try and reverse hit him, that's not what's going to happen to you because you can just get into the boards and absorb the hit on your own. Jamie Benn, not really a dirty. You got to just a frame or hair earlier. You see Brandon Carlo stop, slow down, and stick his ass out to try and hit Jamie Benn first. That's a reverse hit.
Yeah, and actually here, I'll go back one more time. Like if he actually just keeps skating and trying to skate away with the puck, he's got to step on Jamie Benn. He could avoid contact entirely if he wanted to.
Yes, or also, like I said, just get the puck, absorb the hit, and try and move it like every other time that a defenseman has someone closing in on him, approaching the puck at the boards.
Yeah.
Am I crazy? Is my take, you used to be held responsible for protecting yourself. Now I don't know what that means.
He's agreeing with you. Like Brandon Carlo has to protect himself there and not try to initiate the contact. He's 100% agreeing with you in the chat. And I think after hearing your perspective on it, I agree too. You watch it the first time, you're like, whoa. And then as soon as you see the ass sticking out from Carlo, it's like, oh yeah, man, you can't do that. Like, I agree with Jeremiah the way he put it too. You need to be held responsible for protecting yourself. One more inbox for you really quick. I know we're running a little late today, but last night on Amazon, you talked about the Preds maybe being active in the trade market.
Yeah, Barry Trotz is certainly doing his due diligence and examining the center market. Always you have to give to get, and I know the Preds are short on right shot defensemen, but one name that I'm told has popped up in conversation is Alex Carrier on the back end. So Dante Fabro on his way out via waivers. Look, the Preds are probably, the longer this goes, it's Preds, Sabres, Penguins, teams most hungry to shake it up.
Carry a defenseman with some term and a cap hit below $4 million as well. You can see why that would be appealing to some contending teams. Let's get to our daily bets, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. The Canucks let me down last night, but McDavid didn't. Nailed my plus 220 parlay. I'm going with my Friday special, the goal scorer parlay, and it's all Russian. Ivan Barbashev and Alex Ovechkin. Barbashev's been on a tear for the Vegas Golden Knights this year. He's coming off a game in which he didn't score, so I like the bounce back spot, and I love that price tag for the Golden Knights top line winger. And Ovi didn't score his last time out. I feel like he's on one of those runs where he ain't going 2 games in a row without finding the back of the net. Give me these two together at plus 818. And one straight play for tonight. It is the Golden Knights to beat the Utah Hockey Club. Utah's been okay on home ice this year at 4-3 straight up. The Golden Knights started really bad on the road, but they finally got in the win column last time out. So I do kind of like Vegas at this price point. It's just one of those, when it's this close to a pick 'em, give me the team, give me the better team. So simple as that.
And Utah Hockey Club, big day in Salt Lake City as they get their jerseys in stock for the first time. They weren't supposed to be here till after the new year. Fanatics put a rush on it. I don't know if you saw the lines and the photos from people outside of the team store. To this point, just for perspective, they haven't been able to buy a jersey, and now they can. And some interesting insight from Chris Armstrong, by the way, their president of hockey ops, who said that they are going to be keeping one of these jerseys next year. I believe it's their white road uniforms because they want it to continue to say Utah. So if you buy it, it's not like you're going to be left out in the cold, and both jerseys are going to be substantially similar to the ones that they're wearing now. But of course, a team name and logo will be part of it. So interesting from that perspective as well.
Interesting. Let's wrap up the show, Frank, with on a positive note for today's garbage time. Congratulations are in order because our good friend Colby Cohen welcomed his second child and first son to the world early this morning.
Yeah, that's welcome to the Daily Faceoff family, Shane Alexander Cohen. What an amazing experience for them this morning. So look, can't wait to see how quickly Colby's going to have Shane on skates. I know how excited he was to have a boy. And now Shane is going to join their daughter Sloan and going to have tons of fun. But yeah, big day in the Cohen household. And our teammate from Morning Cup of Hockey, who does an unbelievable job across the Nation Network. Welcome, Colby.
Yeah, congratulations to the entire Cohen family. Happy to hear that everyone is doing well this morning. That is a wrap on this week's run of Daily Faceoff Live. A big shout out to our guests from earlier in the week, our producer, Pat Puff, everybody in the YouTube. You were tremendous. Enjoy what should be a fantastic weekend around the sports world, and we'll chat with you on Monday at noon Eastern. See you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content, from daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.